Welcome to the Seller Roundtable e-commerce coaching and business strategies with Andy Arnott and Amy Wees.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Amy Wees, and I'm here with all of you on the Seller Roundtable podcast. Andy is camping with his family right now. So I'm here all by my lonesome, except not by my lonesome, because I have my friend and just awesome entrepreneur, Isaac Smith, with me today. Welcome, Isaac.
Hey, Amy. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. I mean, I don't even know. I don't even remember how I met you. I think I met you through Danny, and you guys did this really great summit, and I was a part of that. And then ever since then, I think I was on your podcast after that, and we hung out a couple of times online. And I was like, hey, this is a pretty cool guy with a pretty cool story. You got to get on my podcast. So awesome to have you here. Let's talk just a little bit about you. So tell us a little bit about you and, where you're from and where you live now, that kind of thing.
Sure. Well, thank you again. And thanks for that nice introduction. It was great having you on the summit. So where I'm from Portland, Oregon. I'm here in my home office, rocking my quarantine haircut. And so, yeah, I'm from Portland. I've spent a lot of time doing a lot of things, but I guess what listeners might like, the story listeners might be interested in is the story of the architect. I used to be an architect, but that sounds awesome. Yes, I know it does, but in reality, it's not. And I was having panic attacks and near mental breakdown. Maybe an exaggeration, but maybe not. And so I just needed to do something else. And that was maybe 2013. I started the e-commerce journey in 2014. And I started with, as you mentioned, high-ticket drop shipping. And I've been doing that almost ever since. And so, yeah, about a year into that, I quit my job and somehow convinced my wife to move across, sell our condo. Let's both quit our jobs, our good paying jobs, move across the country and move in with my parents in Portland. We were living and working in the Washington, D.C. area at the time.
Oh, wow.
And we got in our car and drove. Yeah.
So you went from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast and to live with your parents after you were already independent, somewhat independent.
Yeah.
Now you have a new version of independent, right? But you just decided to make this sacrifice so that you could. Why? So what was the ultimate driver of that sacrifice?
Riches, like I'm stacking cash here, right? Immediate rich and fame. That I guess that's what convinced my wife, was all of that talk, but it didn't happen the way any of us thought. But that was 5 years ago, and we have since taken a big step up. We moved out of my parents' house into my grandma's house about a year later.
That was so unexpected, right? We moved out of my parents' house into my grandma's house.
Yeah.
Okay. So are you still living in grandma's house? Or
no, we have since moved out. But I just like to tell the story that way because, it is about sacrifice. And if you have a dream and you have something that you want and you have a good reason for that, then, hey, it's up to you what you do about it. Are you going to just keep going with what you're doing? Or are you going to actually be willing to make those tough sacrifices? And I give all credit to my wife because I can't imagine, her being willing to do that, to quit a job that she really did love at the time and sell all of our stuff. She still says, man, we shouldn't have sold that bed. It's that one was better than the one we have now. But it's It's about realizing what you want and then going after it. And it's, for me personally, it was more of moving away from what I hate and the pain that I was experiencing in that career, and finding something that would give me freedom and allow me to be myself and who I was and what I think I'm good at, and more along the lines of who I'm destined to be. And so to me, there was no choice. The choice was figuring out how to convince my wife to do this.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that, Isaac, because I, had one of those big high-paying jobs, and the whole family kind of had to sacrifice. When we decided that we were gonna take the ultimate leap, and I was gonna leave this job that gave me all this security, to pay the mortgage and everything else, and we sat our kids down and said, hey, you might not be able to do gymnastics. We might have to eat ramen for a while, and my husband and I, we kind of said, we had a contingency plan for everything. So, if I can't make enough money doing this, we'll go drive Uber. If I can't make enough money, doing this, we had all these kind of backup plans, including maybe selling this big old Texas mansion, for us, it was more important to live our purpose and our dream than to worry about what used to be important, which was keeping up with the Joneses. And it's not important anymore. And now it's important to live the life we want to live. And I think that's so, so powerful when people realize, like, hey, you do have a choice. You do have a choice, and you can make this happen if you really want to, even if it means moving back in with mom and dad or grandma. I love that.
Yeah.
So cool. So tell us a little bit more about high ticket drop shipping, because that's how you got started in e-commerce, and we're an e-commerce podcast. And so tell us a little bit about that. Like, what is high ticket drop shipping, and how did you learn about it, and what kind of things did you sell?
Absolutely. So I think I know that your audience is more of the Amazon sellers, and so that's probably what they're most familiar with. So I want to start by saying, when I decided I wanted to do something different, there was a whole, like everybody listening, and you probably as well, there's that whole journey of finding the blogs, finding the podcasts of like, what could I do? And you find one that leads to another, that leads to another. And eventually I heard, of course, I came across Pat Flynn, who's great and is a great place who was also an architect, which is one of the reasons I had a connection to his podcast at first. But eventually I found people talking about e-commerce, and I thought, yeah, all these other things people are doing, just okay, they sound great, I guess, but they don't make a lot of sense. But here are people who are taking some money and sending an object to a person. That makes sense to me. There's something you can touch, right? And so eventually I found people who were talking about drop shipping. And back then, it was a little different than it is now. If you bring up the idea of drop shipping today, most people, I think you're talking about selling very inexpensive things from AliExpress in China to US customers or all around the world. And that is a very new version of drop shipping that was not around when I got started. And honestly, I mean, we can have that conversation, but I don't think it's a great business model, that version of it. But drop shipping is as old as time. It's as old as the mail order catalogs. And now we do it online. So essentially what it means is you make a sale, you take somebody's money, and you send them something, but you don't actually have that in inventory. Somebody else has it. So a supplier who has a warehouse full of these things, sometimes they're made to order. But essentially you're the middleman. You're the one who's doing the marketing, who's getting that product in front of people who want to buy it in a way that they do want to buy it and that they're willing to pay for it. So you take the order, and then you tell the other person, that your supplier, to ship the item to the customer. So that's essentially what drop shipping is. And when I say high ticket drop shipping, that's kind of what we added now to sort of differentiate it from this new version that is actually quite a bit different. It's not different in concept, but it's different in practice, in terms of just it's more of like flash in the pan kind of fad stuff that you hear about. And if that's what you do and you're making a great business out of it, please take no offense. But that's just what it's looked like from the people I've seen doing that. So yeah, essentially high ticket drop shipping. My very first business, it was a failure, but it took me way too long to realize it was a failure. I was selling remote controlled cars, drones, helicopters, planes, that sort of thing. And the business that actually did take off and eventually I sold last year was, people always are surprised to hear I sold salon furniture and spa furniture. So if you go into a hair salon, which you're not doing right now, except in some states.
Yeah, I went and got my hair done the other day.
Are
and
you?
I was so thankful because.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I need to go, but we're not open yet here in Oregon. So if you go into a hair salon, nail salon, massage studio, or spa, look at any of the furniture in there, the chairs, the tables, the mirrors, the drawers, all that stuff, the massage tables, that's the stuff that I would sell. And so when we say high ticket, generally speaking, we're talking about $200, $300 or more. Most of the stuff that I sold was a couple $1,000s. And so sometimes people would buy one. Very often they'd buy 2 or 3 because they've got a whole salon, or sometimes 10 or 15 or 20. Depends on what it is. So that's what I was doing for about 4 years until I sold that business last year.
So you started your drop shipping business by selling things like RC cars and drones and stuff, and you didn't have very much success with that. So why do you think that you didn't have a lot of success selling the drones and the RC cars?
Yeah, good question. So believe it or not, drop shipping is not that different from a different e-commerce business model, such as selling on Amazon. It is different in idea, but in concept, you're essentially looking for a product that people are buying, that they want to buy, that there's not a ton of competition. There's not too much competition sort of as a ratio to the demand. And so you want to be able to fill that void. And so that's what you're doing no matter where you're selling and no matter what kinds of products. And so I know you're not a fan of the formula that a lot of FBA sellers follow, and you have your own take. I know that. But formulas do work sometimes, not all the time. And in drop shipping, it's no different. So there is a formula, there's a criteria. And so I learned all of this through a course that I took called Dropship Lifestyle. And I'm not affiliated with them at all, but that's where I learned, and they're great and amazing. And it works most of the time, sometimes. But whenever you start anything new, there's a learning curve and there's all kinds of things you don't know. And honestly, I don't know what I don't know, but I think it did not. What I thought it was checking all of those boxes was not actually checking all the right boxes.
And I think so many of us, when we start selling on Amazon or we start selling in e-commerce, we learn the same lessons. I've had plenty of products that I thought were good and it seemed like they were good, but then when I actually tried to sell them, I found, okay, too much competition, or, my differentiation isn't enough, or, so I think it's the same way with drop shipping. Is no matter what you're doing, you have to get in front of the customer who's going to buy from you. You have to get your products in front of the customer who's going to buy from you. And when you do that, you're hoping that there aren't 30 others that are right next to you. You're hoping you can get in front of them and they can make a decision to buy from you. Whether you're drop shipping that product, I mean, really, drop shipping is kind of just a different form of fulfillment. You know, you're kind of just you're the salesperson. You're making a profit. You're not having to have that inventory, but you're able to sell that item, and you still have to go through the whole sales process. The only thing you don't have to go through is the fulfillment process, right? So I totally get it. You know, RC cars and drones, those are actually pretty popular, and I'm sure there was quite a bit of competition there. And so it's not as easy to get in front of that customer and then have them make a buying decision with you when they can also buy on Amazon, or they can buy over here, they can buy over there, and many different prices, many different, you know, methods for selling and advertising that product. So awesome. So you decided to get into this salon and spa furniture. Very cool. And then you scaled that. So talk a little bit about scaling that business. Like, how did you find salons and stuff to sell to? And because we want to talk about, all of us have a goal, most of us anyway, have a goal to sell our businesses. And you sold your business. So can you tell us a little bit about, like, hey, here's how I scaled it, and then here's how I went about selling it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would also add to that, to the RC cars failing, you know, you do need to know your customer. And one thing that I didn't know, so one of the things you look for in this method is you're looking for people with disposable income. So generally upper middle class people who are willing to spend money without worrying about it too much. And so that's what you're hoping for in a lot of this kind of business. But I didn't know that RC car enthusiasts are actually generally not very well off. They're actually, I think, generally on the lower end of income. And they would call me up and we would talk for like an hour. And I say, okay, you ready to buy? They go, yeah, I think I'll go get this off Craigslist used. So there's somebody who's going to trade me. We're going to swap or something. Like, So I didn't know my customer, and I made an assumption that was totally wrong. So there's things that you're going to find out. And so I feel like I've just sort of repeatedly failed enough that something worked out, and I've done it not as fast as I would like. I wish I could have made these iterations much faster. So I didn't even start out thinking I wanted to do salon furniture. It was actually home massage chairs, like those electronic things that'll massage you all up and down. And that didn't work. But I had a store that was called Aria Chairs. And I thought, well, geez, what other kinds of chairs can I sell? And eventually I heard of this thing called a pedicure chair. Honestly, I'd never seen one before in my life. I didn't know such a thing existed. But I figured, okay, before I completely shut this thing down, let me see. And I listed, and it sold. I was like, whoa, great. So yeah, you asked me about scaling. How do you scale? Really, it was a course of 4 years. And as it's the entrepreneurial journey, ups, downs, roller coaster, fear. And really what I've learned now is it's really, really, really important to figure out what you should be focusing on. And that's actually not an easy task. But once you know that, don't be distracted by all these other things.
Squirrel.
And so
I get squirrels all the time. And I think that's something all of us struggle with. So yeah, please keep going. It's good.
Yeah. So, I mean, I tried all kinds of different things, but really in the end, what worked was just focusing on those fundamentals. And, you know, I look through my journal and I can see like all the months that I've wasted trying to build content marketing or something. And yeah, I built a team that can do that, but the ROI wasn't what I wanted. So back to fundamentals. If you're in e-commerce, which if you're in drop shipping, if you're private labeling, if you're whatever, fundamentals are like what we talked about before: finding a customer who wants to buy, finding a product to sell them, and presenting that, getting in front of them and presenting that in a way that compels them to buy. And yes, marketing is great and it's important, but if it pulls you away from that focus on what is working, your business is eventually going to decline. And that's what happened to me. And it's a long, sad story. But at the end of it, I had enough pain that made me realize, and through talking with others, helped me get back onto that path. What is actually working for you right now, and can you double down on that? And so for me personally, in drop shipping, and which is not that different from selling on Amazon, it's about having the right product first and foremost. If you don't have the product that people want to buy, nobody's going to buy it. Secondly is getting that in front of the customer. So you have to know how they're searching. You have to know your PPC, whatever you're using that's working. You have to know how that works and continually get better at it. And then also, critically important is presenting that product in a way that is compelling. So titles, descriptions, keywords, images, all of that stuff is actually very similar between Amazon and selling on Shopify or eBay even. We haven't talked about eBay. I haven't sold there much, but it's all about this product-based business. So if you can keep focusing on that, and it's working, and you don't take your attention away, you should see growth, maintaining that growth. And so once I figured that out and I did that, I saw really big growth, really massive growth right when I listed my business to sell, which is great, but it meant the buyer got to keep that value that I had just created and not pay what it was worth, which I'm not complaining. I'm glad that it worked out that way. And he's glad that it worked out that way. That's really it.
Thanks for tuning in to part 1 of this episode. Join us every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for live Q&A and bonus content after the recording at sellerroundtable.com. Sponsored by the ultimate software tool for Amazon sales and growth, sellerseo.com and amazingathome.com.